that not everything that goes on in Israel is good.
If people actually spoke out and said what it is that they really do believe.
A nation that oppresses another nation is not itself going to be free.
There are other voices.
But when it's Israel, there seems to be silence, and that silence has to be broken.
This people exists, and outright, young and old, male and female, Christian, Muslim, secular, doesn't matter, with one voice say, we refuse to continue living under the conditions you mandate for us. We decline. We will take the risk of death every day to defy it. Where on earth did all that come from?
For the past 5 years, the Palestinian people have been engaged in a national uprising for their freedom and independence. The same freedom and independence that Americans fought for 200 years ago. But for decades now, the daily reality for the Palestinians has been a brutal military occupation, unlike anywhere else in the world. The Palestinian uprising, the Intifada as it is called in Arabic, has been the understandable and justifiable response to this situation. There are over 5 million Palestinians in the world today. About half still live in their homeland, some as second-class citizens in the Jewish state of Israel, most under Israeli military occupation in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem. Mostly as a result of their expulsion during the wars of 1948 and 1967, the other half are scattered in a Palestinian diaspora in countries throughout the Middle East, as well as in Europe, Latin America, and the U.S. Though the term Intifada is new, the Palestinians have been fighting for their independence throughout the century. Before World War I, the Ottoman Turks controlled Palestine and much of the Arab world. Back then, European governments were publicly claiming to support Arab independence, while actually planning in secret to balkanize and control the region for their own gain. After World War I, Britain and France took control of large parts of the Arab world, including Palestine. The victorious Western powers, now led by the United States, further conspired to continue the previous colonial policies after World War II. In 1947, prompted by the desperate conditions of the Jewish survivors of the European Holocaust, the Western-dominated United Nations narrowly voted to partition Palestine into a Jewish state and a Palestinian Arab state. It was in this overall context that Israel came into existence in 1948, but only after a bloody civil war that pitted the Jewish and Arab populations against each other. Ever since that time, rather than advocating democracy and self-determination, Israel and Western countries have continually manipulated Arab politics to keep client regimes in power and to prevent Palestinian self-determination. The Palestinian people, of course, have been among the major victims of these international intrigues. Though among the most educated and cultured people in the region, the Palestinian people have been reduced to refugees and laborers, with both their country and their freedom taken from them. Today, unlike anywhere else in the world, the Palestinians have lived for more than 25 years under a foreign military occupation that continually attempts to rob them of their national and cultural identity while literally beating them into submission. Large numbers of Palestinians have been killed or badly injured. Many others have been arrested, sometimes tortured, often subjected to terribly degrading treatment. Moreover, unlike anywhere else in the world, the people of the United States make possible this grossly unjust military occupation through huge military and economic subsidies to Israel, nearly $5 billion each year in recent years. There are today over 100 Palestinian refugee camps throughout the Middle East, the majority of them inside the occupied territories and thus controlled by the Israeli army.
This is the Dheisheh refugee camp, where displaced Palestinians have been living since 1948, when the Arab-Israeli war forced them to flee from their homes and lands. They came and settled here on the outskirts of Bethlehem, in a camp sponsored by the United Nations. Since June 1967, when Israel invaded the West Bank, they've been living under military occupation.
The occupation is a very brutal state of being. It's a deprivation of a whole people of the right to freedom, of the right to dignity, to human dignity, of the right to life, of the right to freedom of expression, of the most basic human and national rights. This occupation is much more insidious because it attempts to deprive the Palestinians of their humanity and of their national identity. So in many ways it has been a drawn-out, long holding of a whole population as a hostage to be manipulated by Israel for its political ends. It is brutal in terms of its military effects, in terms of the loss of life. It's very cruel in terms of the deliberate and brutal demolition of houses, in terms of the massive detentions of people, especially people without charges, without evidence for long periods of time. It is also brutal in its policy of imposing military sieges and curfews and attempting to totally destroy the Palestinian infrastructure and the very fabric of Palestinian society.
In the Palestinian struggle against occupation, the 7,000 people of Daheisha camp are very active, and they pay a heavy price.
وين أبوك يا حبيبتي؟
وين طخوك؟
الجيش.
وين طخوك؟
في راسه.
A bullet came through the window.
لكن الشباب عاملي وأنا شفته عند يوسف وشفته هو حاطين على الإحرام وحطوه على القبر.
It was a very dangerous wound. He was shot at a close range. The bullet entered his forehead from the left side and settled in the brain. They got the bullet out and told me that Lutfi will live, but he will live half paralyzed, with 50% of his body not functioning.
Lutfi is 18 years old. He was shot in the head with what the Israelis call a rubber bullet, a heavy metal slug with thin rubber coating. As the oldest son, Lutfi was the family's main hope that he would become somebody and help support them.
The girls came running and said, "Muhammad was shot." I said, "Where did he get shot?" They said, "In the stomach." His friends wrapped him in a cloth and took him to the hospital. He came out of the operation making the victory sign. The doctor said he wouldn't live to see tomorrow, that he would die at any moment.
Muhammad was 17 when he was shot. The bullet entered his midsection and shattered. He underwent 4 operations, the last one in America, where the surgeons removed most of his stomach. For 2 years, Muhammad could not eat in a normal way. He lived on food packets attached to his side. He became a legend on the West Bank.
I knew it. I felt it. The minute they shot him, he would become a martyr. But we were happy for Muhammad, that he lived for 2 more years and that he traveled to America and to Jordan and spent time with his friends. Thank God he kept him alive for us for those 2 years so he could be with us. The soldier who shot him was surprised. He said, "Muhammad did not die? He did not die? I shot him so that he could die immediately."
The boys and young men in the camp throw stones at the soldiers constantly, as a never-ending reminder to the Israelis that the occupation must end.
The boys threw stones from top of this building on the soldiers. Then the soldiers blew up the home.
The Intifada is a massive human response to a very inhuman situation. It's a popular upheaval. It's a popular movement whereby the people have overcome their own sense of fear and have responded to the unnatural state of the occupation with a very natural and human expression and civilized expression of determination and persistence.
We are born to give. We are for the Palestinian homeland. We're not afraid of the violence they use against us. We're not stopping our struggle until we achieve our goals and get what's right. First, a person should serve the goal of his people, then comes his own. This is what I think. We have to liberate Palestine. When Palestine is liberated, then we can have our own independent personal lives. As long as there's an occupation, we have no personal lives. I intend to do many things, assuming I don't go to prison or get shot and killed. No one knows. I have no guarantee that I'll live to see tomorrow. Our goals are to be engineers, doctors, everything. This is our ambition. Can it happen under the occupation? They took me to court after holding me for 40 days. In court, the judge sentenced me to 40 days and fined me 500 shekels. When I said I wouldn't pay, then he sentenced me to another month in prison. After that, I was released. My life is the least I can give for Palestine.
بتلبس حطة لا أول شيء بلبس حطة بالكنة عشان نشوف مش الكنابل نرجم
هذا لما تكبر
لا احنا وياه نكبر ننام ونحط حطة لا نعلق إعلام نعلق إعلام فوق نعلق على عمدان إعلام فلسطين
The women, children, and young men do these marches to strengthen their determination, to boast of their courage, to demand freedom and a normal life. But it can be a march of death. The Israeli government has authorized its soldiers to shoot any masked person on sight. Most of the young men and children wear the masks to show their defiance.
I would like my children to have a normal childhood, to go to school, to be able to live without fear, without insecurity. I would like to be able to meet my students, to teach them, to be able to have the luxury of reading and writing academically, of practicing what I've been trained to do, and to know that we have worked for this and guaranteed a secure future for our children.
The children of the Dheisheh camp grow up knowing nothing except life under military occupation. They see what the soldiers do to their fathers, brothers, sisters, and cousins. They see the future that occupation offers them. The odds are that they or someone near and dear to them will be imprisoned or beaten or killed. or crippled. Their teacher says they have a problem with the children. They take their make-believe guns and play their game, Israelis and Arabs. These children have never run in a park or jumped in a swimming pool or played at the beach. They know what toys look like only because they see them on television. Many young Palestinian men are wanted by the Israeli military authorities. This secret list contains the identification numbers of those wanted. Mohammed's number is on the list. He's 19 years old and has been in prison 7 times. He's been dodging the Israelis for the past 2 years.
We saw that we will end up in prison. Our future is in prison. Because we have always considered ourselves fighters, we will stand in the face of occupation. I spend my days in the streets. At night, it depends on the situation. If it's safe, I might sleep in someone's home. If it's not, I might spend the night on a rooftop. One night, the soldiers raided the home I was staying in. But the soldiers didn't even talk to me. They only wanted the person whose house I was sleeping in. They asked him his name, took him and left. They didn't even ask me my name. It was a scary moment. Everyone who lives a life like mine, and even everyone in the camp, knows that death faces them every day, and easily they could be killed at any moment.
Again, in addition, it's the indignity of being treated like subhuman creatures, of being herded off like cattle, of being cooped up in your houses, of losing not just the freedom of speech and expression, but the freedom of movement, of being deprived of fresh air and sunshine.
The Israelis impose curfews as collective punishment. They can last for a day, a week, a month. This elderly man is sick, but he can't go to a doctor because during curfew, the soldiers lock the camp gate.
When there are curfews, I always bake my own bread. Will I allow my children to be short of food? The intention of the Israelis is to starve us to death. Never. We won't allow it. We won't die of starvation. We challenge them in everything. We are not free to live and build our country. We can't build it because they are oppressing us. But one of these days they will leave. Turkey ruled us and left. Britain came and left. And the Israelis will leave too, God willing.
Well, I would like total independence and freedom, an independent Palestinian state where we can live in dignity and freedom, where we can determine our own lives, where we can restore to our children their stolen childhood.
In the struggle against occupation, the role of the girls is to watch for the soldiers, to supply the demonstrators with stones, and to take food and clothing to the wanted men who can't return to their homes. these girls find their lives totally disrupted.
I finished high school in prison and had no chance to go to college. But I want to learn.
Maher is 25 years old. He spent 4 years of his life in prison for resisting the occupation.
The whole world must know. The American must know. The Brazilian must know. The French must know. And the German must know that we are a part of the human race. We are a part of the human race just like them, and them like us, exactly. We also have feelings, passions, and emotions. Every one of us loves. We struggle because of love. We work on changing our circumstances because of love, in all its aspects, romantic love and the love of humanity.
I would like to see this whole area deal with its own problems in a genuine and essential way, not through dealing with the symptoms and the outcomes, but through dealing with the long-standing grievances that have been allowed to fester, that have been ignored, or that have been treated in the wrong way. Ultimately, I would like to see this region prosper and develop in freedom and in dignity.
To feel that I exist, that I'm a Palestinian, that I have an identity.
To achieve freedom and self-worth as Palestinians.
The goal we struggle for, a Palestinian state. To get rid of the occupation and have a Palestinian state.
For all the young men who died, the ones in prison, and those wounded. As Palestinians, we want our Palestinian state.
As Jews, I think we should all be appalled to see Jews acting in the way that Israel has acted towards the Palestinians.
I think the least that the United States can do is reduce its aid by the amount which it costs Israel to maintain the occupation.
Just say no to Israel. That's something we seem just to be unable to do.
But as long as we pour the money in, what need is there for Israel to change its policy?